Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cybersecurity criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello, and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. For another great episode. This is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Mike Rotondo and Lauro Chavez. And we have guest Ed Escobedo back here with us today for some interesting conversation, talking about a program that's developed. And before we dive into that, though, Mike, why don't you kick us off with the news?
All right, so the news for today. This story isn't going away yet, so this has been around for a while. Hack to patch by law enforcement is a dangerous practice. As you all may recall, we've talked about this before, but the FBI went and fixed a bunch of Exchange servers without notifying anybody. They got a court order, took 4 days, removed the web shells. They didn't patch anything, didn't change anything. Now there's more stories coming out about there. Two principal reasons of concern. First, patching by exploit contravenes basic enterprise security practices. And second, the risk of collateral damage at the enterprise level is too great simply because of the law of unintended consequences. But I'd like to focus on something that's not in the article, is that is the concern of constitutionality and the violation of the Bill of Rights. Do they really have the right to just go into your computer without notifying you and make changes to it? So
and how many honeypots do you think they spent all this time patching?
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing, is they're not patching. They're finding the active root shell, right, that's calling out to the command and control, and so they go in through that shell that's already there. Basically, the owners haven't figured out they've been breached, and so the web shell's running. And the FBI thinks it's a good idea, basically, to break in using the web shell itself and then uninstall it. Which that's the process I'm questioning, right? How are they uninstalling the shell?
And they're
not patching the server, right?
Right, they're not fixing the problem. They're just removing the shell that just makes them exploitable all over again. So something tells me there was more to that hack than we're being told. Maybe. I want to give the FBI the benefit of the doubt, especially if they're listening. Hi, FBI.
Oh, they're listening.
Oh, hi, guys. Yeah, no, we think it's real cool and all. But...
Yeah, you're awesome.
Somebody's coming up to my door in a black Suburban. Hold on, guys. I'll be right back.
Hold on. Yeah, I think it's a pizza.
Yeah. CISA used new subpoena power to contact companies vulnerable to hacking. Okay, here's another federal thing. Apparently, there was a law passed sometime last year that went into effect in January that allows Homeland Security to use subpoena power to contact U.S. internet service providers with customers whose software is vulnerable to hacking. The Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, has long sought this, and they basically want to identify technology firms with flaws and contact them prior to being exploited or hacking. Again, this is just another can of worms that I'm not seeing as a good idea.
Well, I to be the advocate on the other side here, I'd like to front this conversation with, there is a lot of deprecated software that is, don't it's not broken, don't fix it sort of mentality, because their apps are running on it that they need for business, that is causing probably all kinds of scary stuff at a Homeland Security level. And so, I mean, I can understand letting those people know that, you shouldn't have RDP open to your Windows XP box at all, ever. Right. And, and so we don't have a power sometime to go in and tell a client that, right? Because we have those business operational, perspective that they have. Like, if they need it for work, it's hard to justify turning it off. But with a subpoena, right, from a federal organization come in and say, look, we understand you need to migrate your app.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't mind the strong arm tactic to this extremely deprecated software that all makes us weaker as a nation. But I do agree. There's certainly some questions around the programmatic process they're using.
Yeah, and that's really my concern. And this bill was crafted by a couple of lawyers in the House of Representatives and in the Senate. So lawyers in IT, I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole, but hopefully they had good input from somebody. Social engineering, watch out for these threats against cybersecurity experts. Basically what's happening now is there are social engineering campaigns against cybersecurity experts and researchers and they're using the best intentions of these people against them, and trying to get into people's head and exploit them, steal data and IP. So be careful who you're talking to.
Yeah, I've been turning down Google and McAfee and all these job people that are approaching me via email, and I like to click on the smishing on my drop phone just to see what type of exploits you're trying to execute into my SMS. But good job, guys. Keep it up. It's fun.
You know what I do with those? I take those URLs and I put them into like my Kali box, over a Tor, and just see what it winds up at. And it's always interesting. And generally, it's not someplace you want to be.
That's right.
All right. So spam and phishing in Q1 2021. The past year, cybercriminals have actively exploited the topic of government payouts, most often in relation to damage caused by the pandemic. In Q1 2021, scammers imitating bank emails began to focus on compensation. Their links in their messages took the victim to a well-designed phishing page with official emblems, business language, and reference to relevant laws. The attacks are mostly aimed at stealing any credit card details and personal data. So be careful what you click on. This is kind of scary if you get older parents that might have a pacemaker or something. Cybersecurity and the growing use of medical IoT devices. Major hackable devices in the IoT world are smart pens, infusion and insulin pumps, wireless vital monitors, thermometers, temperature sensors, implantable cardiac devices, and of course, security cameras. These devices were found to be hackable via brute force attacks. A lot of them are running on deprecated XP machines. During the research, the security experts, they discovered cardiology device, anesthesia equipment, infusion systems, MRI scanners, nuclear medical systems through basic Shodan queries. So give us all a moment of pause next time you go into a hospital or.
Gosh, that's just a huge problem with the medical companies, right? Where they build it to platform running a certain version and then they never change it.
Right, because they don't even think about it. They have no insight and understanding. And I think we talked to a client when we first started Silent Sector, and the guy's like, "Oh no, we'll never get hacked. No one's ever going to come after us,"
says the wise man.
Yeah.
Ha.
He who scrubs car with dirty brush still has dirty car.
Exactly. Attackers are using compromised accounts to create and distribute malicious OAuth apps. So OAuth apps, if you don't know, add business features and user interface enhancements to major cloud platforms such as O365 and Google Workspace. Unfortunately, they're also a new threat vector as bad actors are increasingly using malicious OAuth 2.0 applications or cloud malware to siphon data and access sensitive information. In 2022, Proofpoint detected more than 180 different malicious applications attacking over 55% of customers with a success rate of 22%. The attacker basically creates a malicious code and hosts it on a web server via URL, compromises a web target, creates an app, puts it in the Azure portal, marking the application as multi-tenant application, and then they use the code to steal. Be careful what you're clicking on out there. A malware group leaks millions of stolen auth cookies. Raccoon, which is, I'm giving credit for the name, is a fairly typical malware as a service where you pay $75 to $200 per month. You get access to a toolkit to generate malware payloads and a back-end website to administer your campaign from. It's designed to steal login credentials, credit card information, cryptocurrency wallets, and browser information. So,
see, Raccoon is actually an anagram for Trash Panda. So if you say it, Trash Panda actually makes sense.
What is that from? Is that from Guardians of the Galaxy?
Maybe. Anyways,
basically what they're using is they're using these cookies and then that are encrypted in the Windows API, and they're using them to exploit the malware. The reason why the threat actor focused on stealing auth cookies is that they allow better and easier access to an account compared to username and passwords. But to add insult to injury, after users were infected by the malware strain that stole their passwords and personal data, the malware operators forgot to secure their back-end servers, which leaked sensitive user information for hundreds of thousands of victims for more than a month. So I guess the hackers need to work on their process and procedure to ensure, the safety of their data.
The safety of cookies.
Yeah. Misconfigs and unpatched bugs to top cloud native security incidences. Over half of organizations have suffered a security incident due to misconfiguration or known vulnerability in their cloud native applications. There's an open source security firm called Snyk that put out their State of the Cloud Native Application Security Report and revealed that adoption of the cloud native techniques is soaring, with over 78% of production workloads now deployed as containers or serverless applications. However, this comes with its own risk, as 60% of developers have had increased security concerns since going cloud native. They reported misconfiguration 45% and known unpatched bugs 38% were the most commonly experienced security incidents. This one's kind of funny. You get what you pay for. Ruck Ransomware finds foothold in BioResearch Institute through a student who wouldn't pay for software. Student went looking for a free version of a data visualization software tool, which would have cost hundreds of dollars per year. He went to a forum, asked to find a free alternative, couldn't find a free alternative, so he went and purchased a cracked version. And when they launched the software, it loaded a Trojan, which was able to harvest students' access credentials to the Biomolecular Institute's network. So, be careful with cracked software. Cisco critical vulnerabilities enable remote attackers to execute commands. They've already patched this bug, but there are multiple vulnerabilities in the web-based management interface of Cisco HyperFlex HX and SD-WAN vManage. When exploited, it allows unauthenticated remote attackers to execute arbitrary code. And lastly, ransomware hackers infect thousands of SonicWall VPN implementations. There's a ransomware identified as 5 Hands. They managed to exploit a zero-day flaw in SonicWall SMA 100 series VPN solutions to compromise networks of different organizations in the United States and Europe. So with that, what do you got for us, Laurel?
There's not as many active exploits that we've got. Certainly to the front of the attack vectors we're seeing in the news, that's for sure. So I've got one good one for you this week that I think is important, and it's involves WordPress, fixed price, big surprise. Anyways, so SuperEdit, one of the plugins, 254. There's a remote file upload piece for that's been proof of concept, pretty good. So you can get some arbitrary code past the server hosting the WordPress. So if you've got WordPress, check your plugins. If you're running SuperEdit, upgrade that. I think they've got a new version out. It's like 2.6 or 2.56 or something like that. Check into it. Make sure that you're not vulnerable to the file upload. And so that's it for this weekend, exploitable vulnerabilities.
Want even more Cyber Rants? Be sure to subscribe to the Cyber Rants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, Cyber Rants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
Great. Well, thank you both. And Ed, it's great to have you back. Welcome back.
Good morning, Zach. Thank you for having me this morning.
Great. Our pleasure. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this. What we're talking about today really is a discipline that I think is often forgotten about in the industry, and that is one of leadership, one of alignment across business units, one of really stepping up the maturity level of an existing cybersecurity program. So working in mid-market and emerging organizations, a lot of times companies start with nothing. Go in and get them aligned to a framework, get a lot of different things taken care of to get a formalized cybersecurity program in place. Now, companies that have that, though, it seems to me, and I'm curious to your thoughts, but it seems to me like they, once that's in place, they're far better off than they were before. But a lot of companies that you see mid-market and larger organizations will hit this kind of growth ceiling in the capability of their cybersecurity program. And it seems for them to almost be just an ongoing, indefinite struggle. Why is that, Ed? What are you seeing out there in the wild, so to speak? And why is it these companies that, even though they have all the kind of the foundational elements in place, they kind of hit this stopping point in terms of maturity?
Sure. I mean, I think the thing that I see, and Lauro and Michael sort of talked about some of the technical depth and expertise that many CISOs or IT security directors have to pay attention to. I mean, what I see is the bulk of their job is consumed by all of the various exploits that are in the wild and all the attacks and the surface area attacks that happen across the enterprise. And the part that I'm finding, and this is confirmed by a Gartner report that I recently read, is that CISOs are so consumed by all the technical issues that they have to deal with that it's important for them, I think, to try to understand how to be more effective in the softer areas of leadership, the areas of influence and governance and relationship building and service delivery, and sort of thinking about their organizations not only and exclusively as the one-stop shop to prevent attacks from outside into the network, but also building influence and relationship skills across their teams and across the organization and across stakeholders to really make sure that everyone understands the importance of security. So it's very much on the other side of the coin of leadership. I mean, you have to have the technical chops to be a CISO, but then the thing I'm finding is that you also need to have, strong leadership, influence, relationship building skills to build trust, credibility, and respect with your business partners.
So what's your advice, or what kind of guidance would you provide to those? Let's take the example of the CISO who grew up through the technical ranks, right, and is tremendously skilled in that. It seems to me like from a business perspective, a lot of times it's hard to step out of what you know really well, right, in order to rely on others to do those things, right? Because you always have certain ways you want to do things and certain ways that you want to see different projects accomplished. But what would your advice be to those people that are maybe they're new to the CISO role or maybe not, but they need to really transition their thinking in order to reach the next level of capability?
Yeah, and the thinking behind this program that we've developed is really to help CISOs become more effective in their careers as leaders and as executives and aspiring executives in the roles. And I know how hard the job of CISO is. I've had CISOs report to me. I've been a BISO at a large company, and so it's a very difficult job with lots and lots of pressures and demands. I mean, the one thing I would encourage CISOs to do is to sort of think of your role as a business person, right? And there are three keys, I think, in my mind to help CISOs be successful. One is make sure that you reallocate time to relationship build and do strategic planning. And that needs to be aligned with the business. I think it's really important that they think about the role of the security function and security program that is running lockstep with the business and with the company and the demands of the company and the growth plans of the company, and that there's clear strategic planning alignment with the key business leaders across the company. The second thing is just prioritizing your time and the allocation of your time as you build relationships and as you meet other people, not just to your own team or not just to the technology, the IT, the CIO technology function, but prioritize the relationships with non-IT stakeholders, the CFO, the CMO, the person that's doing sales, because those are the people that you need to have in your camp. When things don't go as well as they should, and you're dealing with a crisis. So building that level of trust proactively, I think, is really important. And then the third thing I think relates to just making sure that you do the basic blocking and tackling of leadership so that you can manage stress, that you have that you've built a good team around you, that that you're doing all the basic service delivery things around meeting your project timelines, that you've set up a governance program that scales. Those things I think are critical to have the core foundation to be able to, and obviously that you have a framework in place that you're managing to the risk. So those are the three, I think, keys to success that I've seen and that has been validated by the literature that I've read.
What would be your advice, or what kinds of things have you seen that have worked well for you and others in terms of creating good collaboration across the various business units? You mentioned prioritizing time with the CFO and the CMO and others that are handling different business aspects. What's the kind of the practical approach, or can you dive into that a little bit more about what you actually do with those different business units?
Yeah,
I mean, the relationships.
Well, and the roles that I've played, when I've had this function in organizations is, number one, you just have to make the time, right? You have to do one-on-ones. You set up a cadence with these non-IT stakeholders. You put it on your calendar. You give them updates in the context of the things that they have. The second thing that I've seen that's been effective is in places that I've worked is you establish a quarterly business review with your stakeholders. So you have insights and metrics and operational understanding of what's going on with the risk, specifically in the language of their business. And the things that you're dealing with, particularly on the service delivery side, that are helping their business, maybe tickets that you've handled that are coming from their organization, and giving them feedback on how you've been able to handle and respond and help people that work for your stakeholder constituents. You're helping them be more effective and, either writing code that's more aligned with best practices and other things. And then the third thing, which is the most important thing, is really just getting alignment at the top, whether it's the audit and risk committee or the CEO or the CTO, so that you have a top-down prioritization. I'll call it a hammer that helps the organization realize that this isn't just a secure, keeping the company free from hacks and data breaches isn't just the CISO's job, it's everyone's job. And so getting alignment at the top and making sure that accountability flows from the top down is another really, really important key to success, I think. So those are the 2 or 3 things that I can think of to help CISOs, build maturity and maybe expand their skill sets into things that they might not have had to deal with in the past.
Great advice. What about, we talked a little bit about on the leadership side across business units from that side, but what about within your team defining or creating accountability and measurement of performance of the various team members? What would your advice be there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've always had the opinion as a leader, from the many years that I've been in IT, that, you can't improve what you don't measure, right? So it obviously starts with the control baseline and making sure that you have a clear understanding of where your gaps are in your control inventory, and making sure that is transparent to not just your own team, but to your stakeholders, both on the IT side and on the business side, so that everybody's aware of where the problems could exist. And then having a cadence that sort of tracks that over time, whether it's monthly or quarterly or whatever the cadence that makes sense for your business is. That obviously is number one, because you have to get alignment around what the top 5 to 10 risks are, so that you can attack those first. There's so many things to fix in the security area, as you guys know, that you've seen. So you want to make sure that you're focused and you're laser focused on the most important risks that exist in the enterprise. So that would be number one. I think the second thing is just making sure that you help your partners, particularly on the IT side, build operational metrics so that they can align the things that they're doing within, their ecosystem to ensure that you've got, that they're helping you with like operational daily metrics and dashboards that can give you an insight into how you're moving the needle on reducing risk across the categories that come out of the framework that you're using.
Let's talk a little bit about, we've actually developed a framework and methodology to create organizational alignment and gain adoption throughout the organization. And for those listeners that don't know, Ed is the Chief Strategy Officer of Silent Sector. So when I talk about this, Silent Sector's organizational adoption methodology, what would you like to share about that process? How maybe start with a little bit about how it was developed, but anything else you'd like to mention to the listeners about why it's important to think through this as opposed to continuing to grind, forward with the way things are if you don't have a fully aligned organization.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of inspired by 2 things. One is just reading in the literature that's in the public domain about how companies should think about aligning their cybersecurity programs with the business. And the second, as somebody who's always been customer focused in all the jobs I've had in IT and in security, thinking about developing a methodology that does an internal assessment of how you think you're doing, but then also validating that with key stakeholders across the business community and doing a 360-degree feedback. So with those 2 things, both sort of a framework that comes from the public domain and the literature that I've read, and then secondly, just my energy towards, always being focused on the customer as kind of the primary role that any leader has to do as in an organization. We've come up with 6 principles that we put in place in a methodology that we think can help CISOs and IT security directors really understand sort of how they think they're doing versus how the business thinks they're doing, and then getting those gaps and coming up with practical recommendations that that they can implement, in a way that helps them close those gaps. And the goal here is to build trust and confidence and respect with the business, so that they have the ability to have sustained relationships and also grow their careers and be more successful in the roles that they aspire to beyond security, maybe down the road.
And you've put together a 6-principle process, really, that you go through. It's really looks like a framework in essence, but for a thing that your traditional security frameworks don't accomplish. And so, would you give us an overview of those 6 principles, why they matter?
Yeah, I can do that. So the first is developing and governing a healthy security culture, right? And that speaks to both security governance and security culture across the enterprise. The second, which I think is to me really, really important, is speaking and managing risk in the language of the company or the language of the business. I think we pride ourselves as technologists that, we speak a certain language and we have a certain culture that we can understand amongst ourselves. But when you're talking to a CFO or a CMO, they have no idea what a control is, or what a vulnerability is. So having to explain that in a language that resonates with them is so critically important. The third, which I spoke to earlier, is really just establishing that control baseline and that sort of reference point, which is kind of helps you establish the true north of how you're going to make the environment safer and more secure. And then the fourth one relates to just rationalizing your security program and putting it in the narrative of the IT strategy. So making sure that the security strategy and the security program is clearly lockstep with the IT strategy, because you can't do security without close alignment with the CIO and the IT operations folks that are managing and operating the environment that's being run. The fifth is controlling access without putting a drag on the business. I think one of the things I've seen is sometimes we as security professionals will, lock down everything and cause the business to slow down. But sort of having a good understanding of explaining how to help the business go faster in a secure way, rather than stopping them from doing it, I think is critical. And then the final one, which relates to managing stress, which is one of the keys, I think, is just making sure you have a strong cross-functional resilience program and a reaction program and an incident management program, because you're going to be dealing with critical events that happen inevitably. So you want to make sure that you have that muscle established and those processes established and the policies and procedures established. So you're not the only one as a security professional having to steer the ship when something breaks. You've got sort of cross-representation with legal and with your technology partners, with public relations and other people that need to be involved when critical incidents happen.
Well, thank you, Ed. This is excellent stuff. There's a lot to be said here. We certainly have more to talk about on future episodes. So I thank you for joining us. For the listeners out there, Ed just has a tremendous background, ranging from head of technology risk management for PayPal to CIO of Apollo Education Group, VP roles for big companies like DHL and Charles Schwab, and he's U.S. Air Force veteran as well. So thank you so much, Ed. Any final thoughts or advice or wisdom you would share with the listeners before we jump off here?
No, the only thing I will end with is what I always end with is how proud I am to be part of the Silent Sector team and serving our mid-market clients, making sure that we help them protect the backbone of the American economy. I think that's critical. And so I'm excited to have developed this program and to be a resource for CISOs or IT security directors who just got into the job, who maybe need some help, if they're struggling with their, challenge and getting adoption within their organizations. I'm happy to be a resource, and I think we can bring the full silent security portfolio to bear, as opportunities come up.
Great. Well, thank you, Ed. And if you're a CISO or even a CIO listening to this and need some guidance, need some help on the topics that we cover today, by all means, reach out. We'll get you connected directly with Ed, and you can chat and go from there. So thank you all for listening.
Hey, Zach, one thing, I'm happy to jump on a call with anybody just to try to understand what their challenges are. I'm happy to do that, just to get some free advice as people need it. So just reach out and we'll get on a call and we'll talk about how we can help.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed. Well, and thank you all for listening. If you like the podcast, please subscribe, reach out, let us know what you'd like us to discuss, concerns that you have, questions, anything like that. We're happy to address in future episodes. Thank you all for listening. And if you haven't checked out the book on Amazon, go to look up Cyber Rants. And I think if you enjoy the podcast, you'll really enjoy the material we cover in the book. So have a great day, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Rants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants podcast.